All right, the game is Chicago 68 from the Dietz Foundation. This is I don't know what you describe this as. You pull the map out and it looks like a coin game, right? You've got your sectors with cubes of different factions. You got your connecting zones. You've got different types of areas with different properties. It's so the map looks very coin-like. The game is not coin-like in any way in terms of function. Certainly, in terms of the cards, I mean there are cards, but the coin deck layout is okay. You've got a current card that the active player has access to, knowing what the next card is going to be, so they can make choices based on that. There's none of that here. This is each faction, and there's 4 factions, so that's coin-like. But there's 4 factions, each two on each side, essentially. So you could do like a 4-player version. I played the 2-player competitive version. I just played it 2-handed rather than trying to do solo rules because I wanted to see how it would play as a competitive game without using a bot to run one side or the other. But each faction has their own hand of action cards that they can play, with the possibility for the demonstrator side to potentially add cards to their hands from the street theater display over here, which is pretty cool because it can potentially, based on how they're playing their guys on the board, can potentially add new powers to their hand. You can see here that this card from the street theater, if they had 2 agitators in Michigan Avenue, they got this street fighting man, which allows like an automatic injury of any police platoon in the same area as a level 2 mob. And that gains exposure, but doesn't, as is the case with the usual clash cards, doesn't increase instability. It does say conflict card, but it doesn't have the typical mob chaos card that you'd have to check for. So that was interesting. I never actually used this, though. It was in their hand. And then this one, McCarthy Kids Clean for Gene, allows you to remove one of the red cubes and place it in the delegate bag as a delegate, which is something you can usually do if the demonstrators manage to run their exposure off the end of the board there. So I may have used this once, but otherwise I was getting enough exposure with the demonstrators that I didn't have to spend a lot of time putting cubes in the board. There was, or in the bag, there was times where I kind of didn't want to have to put cubes in the bag because you have to take them off the board and put them in the bag. And that potentially reduces your control of zones or your ability to clash and stuff like that, because it changes the makeup of the number of cubes that you have in particular zones. And so, as the demonstrators, you're trying to control zones in order to get, there's certain advantages for the demonstrators to control zones. And then there's definite advantages for the police, for the establishment to control zones. So messing around with the cubes on the board face as opposed to from the general supply or from reserves or the demonstrator supply up there can have an impact on the game. But so anyway, thoughts on my first playthrough. Really, really, really enjoyed it. As I was playing through, all these little kind of balance-related nuances came out, and the game seems to me to be well balanced. That's probably a premature assessment based on only one playthrough. It's possible there's a game-breaking card combination in there somewhere, or certain trick or something. But my playthrough, not knowing anything about the cards, not having read through anything ahead of time, I didn't find anything game-breaking, and everything seemed to be pretty well balanced until the game ended and the demonstrators won decisively. You can see the delegate track there, there's 6 McCarthy delegates to only 5 Humphrey delegates, which means that the exposure track was set dead in the middle, but that doesn't even matter since McCarthy got the nomination. It ended that way but you can see, like, there's a ton of demonstrators in the jail, and the establishment is in control of most of the board, and yet they lost decisively. I think the issue that I had was probably I was really focused with the establishment on the mayor's policy cards and like managing the municipal budget, and didn't pay enough attention, I don't think, to the number of delegates in the bag. Now, the establishment can use these cards and the mayor's hand to manipulate both cubes in the bag of the delegates and the number of the actual cubes on the track. Like, he can stack blue cubes onto the track. He can remove red cubes from the track. So I didn't do enough of that because I thought, there's a ton of blue cubes in the bag and not, nearly as many red cubes. But the demonstrators were adding red cubes into the bag as the game went on, and they ended up with, I think they still ended up with 1 less. But if it comes down to, at the end of the game, I had gotten with the demonstrators, I had played one of these street theater cards that allowed them to remove 3 delegates from the track, and there were 3 blue delegates, so they just threw them back in the bag. So if the establishment is not stacking the delegate track in their favor, it's going to come down to the bag at the end of the game. So it was back down to just 4 cubes on the track at the end of the game, and I had to draw the rest of them, and it just came out in favor of McCarthy. And if the establishment lets it come down to a random draw at the end of the game to determine who the winner's going to be, and they're not already in the lead on the track, it doesn't matter what they were doing out here. So I think I got too wrapped up in trying to manipulate and master the policy splay down here, which is, so the mayor, he plays his hand of cards, and then the police play their hand of cards. The same way the Yippies play theirs and the Mob play theirs. And if you look at it in terms of like, these are kind of like the leadership, and the Yippies are kind of the leadership and the Mobs are the troops. Same thing here, the mayor is the leadership and the police are the troops. That's the kind of the function of each of the factions. And so the mayor, all these cards, let the mayor do certain things. And you can kind of combo cards on here, which is what I was doing. I had this advanced tactic card. You can see it's been discarded because I'd kind of gotten everything I needed to out of it by the last turn, or the last round. But this allows you to, whatever tactics card you actually have here, it allows you to do all of them except mob support, just activate their function. And so what I was comboing at the time, and this has a different card than I had most of the game. Most of the game I had the Boss Daily card. Where the hell is it? That's interesting. I don't know where the Boss Daily Tactics card is. I don't know if it got mixed in or not. It's not over here. Yeah. Oh, here it is. Somehow I accidentally stuck it back in. So I had this card, which allowed you could pay 2 exposure once per round and activate any 1 policy card in display without paying capital. Usually what I would do is I'd spend that 2 exposure and I would play, this was out here in the display at the time, I would play this, which would allow me to do this for free, and then I could use another tactics card. So it was a way for me to run 2 tactics cards, to spend the power of 2 tactics cards each turn instead of just 1, and do it for no cost, except the cost and exposure. And that also ended up costing me, I think, the game. I spent most of the game with the exposure deep into the red over there. I think because I was, frequently doing this and not and I was frequently, placing barbed wire and placing tear gas. And I don't remember if maybe the tear gas does give me exposure when I do it. Yeah, you do gain exposure when you do tear gas. So for whatever reason, though, I was not gaining a lot of exposure on a round-by-round basis with the establishment. And, there's a couple instances, I think I did tear gas twice, where I was able to do it, where I'd trapped, I think the demonstrators were here and here, like big batches of them, and I'd blocked, I'd used barbed wire. No, I'd used barbed wire here, and no, I don't remember what I did, because there was ways where you would do tear gas in two of these zones and then block off with barbed wire. Maybe I had barbed wire there. That prevented, they couldn't retreat barbed wire, couldn't retreat into tear gas, and so they all died. It just means you have to take them off the board, and it really sets the demonstrators back in terms of their recruitment. So I was able to do that once or twice, I think. But I think one of the times I did it here, I was with the demonstrators, I was also kind of frequently gathering in these zones to sort of marshal forces and then move into the bigger prize spaces. And so it's not lucrative for the police to come and beat a bunch of demonstrators in these transit zones. Likewise, it's not lucrative for the demonstrators to clash, although I didn't clash with the demonstrators on purpose very often. I would typically do it if it was done through street theater cards, but this isn't going to reap a lot of exposure rewards for the establishment if they're cracking heads in here, whereas, the establishment wants to be hitting the hippies in the park. These two parks, those are going to be the most lucrative spots for them to gain exposure against the demonstrators. Otherwise, it's, twos and ones. Likewise, it's not super helpful for the demonstrators to clash here. They want to do their clashing on Michigan Avenue at the Hilton Hotel and certainly at the convention hall, where they're going to gain super exposure. But like I said, I feel like I spent most of the game with exposure deep in the red, to where it was so far over so frequently that I was having to look up the rule. It says, ignore any additional exposure on there, that they only get one delegate, but they spent so much time there that multiple actions would happen where they would gain more exposure and already be maxed. And so I think I read the rule right, that once you've gotten your free delegate for going off the end of the track, if later on that round you play another card that gets you more exposure again, you're already off the track, so you don't get to do that again. Even though it's separate actions that are leading to it, separate card plays, separate street theater cards that are leading to that, or separate anything. It only happens the first time, and then once you have to get back down off the maximum and then get back to it in order to ever do the delegate thing again. So I'm pretty sure I played that right, but it was at a point where it would just sit there for action after action, and I kept getting more and more exposure with the demonstrators, but was already maxed. So I think I was doing something wrong there with the establishment in terms of not being able to get the exposure back over. I thought I would get it just based on control of the zones, but in the last turn I ended up one exposure short to get it over. Like I said, it didn't matter anyway because I lost in the delegate race. So the question then is, what should I have been doing with the establishment, rather than trying to get these card combos? And I ran it, so I was able to run a ton of these, because I would do this reconvene one, where you can draw two policy cards and select one to replace any policy card in the display. So that's what allows you to replace cards you may not need or want to play anymore. But you get to run that for free. So one of the cards that I got then early on was Aldermanic Support. I drew Aldermanic Support as one of the two cards I could play for free, or one of the cards that I could play for free of the two. You discard the other one. So I was like, okay, well, let's put this down. And then that allows me to activate one either to the left or the right. So I was able to do that. And then I paid and did this and activated a card again. I think on the last turn of the game, I think I played the effects of like 6 to 8 of these cards because I had a ton of money in the bank because the protesters had freed some people, and I had collected, on a number of things. I'd greased palms, so I had like $12 or something in the municipal budget. So I just ran card after card after card on the mandate play, and then on the boss daily play, and I thought, yeah, this is great. And see, most of these arrests that happened over here were one of these that allowed me to. I was doing this Law and Order one, and that was again. Because it was next to the aldermanic support, so I would run the aldermanic support, do Law and Order, and I ran Law and Order like 3 times on the last on the last turn, and just piled more guys in there along than the mass arrests and stuff. And I think the other thing I didn't focus on too much with the establishment that I should have been was I was busy arresting cubes and not the agitators. And so if you leave the demonstrators with too many agitators on the board, they're going to get a ton of street theater cards, and the street theater cards are super useful for the demonstrators. I mean, you can see I played a lot of them because one reason, because I had so many agitators on the map that I was able to usually satisfy the requirements, and there's no restriction on how many of these you can play in a single turn or a single round. If you've got agitators that satisfy these location requirements, you can just play a whole handful of these all at once. And so that really, really helped the demonstrators kind of stay on top of things. And the other thing I love about the street theater cards is they are super thematic. So they really add to the immersion level of the game. And they're tailored to, if you have to have a guy in Grant Park. These are things that happened then the event here. In this case, it was Allen Ginsberg doing his Om chant. These are things like that's where that happened. Same thing in the convention hall. You've got Dan Rather here getting pushed around. That actually happened, and so it's really cool. And then you've got some that that weren't specified in a place, but things that actually happened. The clergy joined the protesters. These things just add immeasurably to the immersion factor of the game. The other thing you had here was the instability track. I was never able to get it down. I think the establishment would have to get the drawdown card into their hand pretty early, which is one of their ways to decrease instability, to get it down into the zone where they can start picking these up. Otherwise, it seems like it was much, much easier. You can see it ended on 11. So the establishment, or the demonstrators, had almost gotten all 3 of the potential bonuses. They took the bonus splay item. They took the +1 action, so I could run 2 cards, an extra card for a turn. And they took they only took 2. But the establishment has to get the track all the way back down here into it starts at 3, and they have to get it negative. So I think it's harder in general for the establishment to get those bonus items. You can see I ran out of the reserves. For the establishment, I spent a lot of time putting the barbed wire out and trying to trap the groups of protesters with limited success. I did eventually get protesters into the convention hall. Again, I had that convention hall street theater card. And that was because I just, ran a card play that kind of got me ahead of what the establishment was doing. I got my guys here. I sacrificed 2 clash cards because I took away barbed wire that was there. Then on the establishment turn, they added the barbed wire back. And then on here, I took it away again. And they were moving the attack forces closer. And then we're going to try and tear gas me out. And, they had a barbed wire here to try and kill me. But once I got that second barbed wire out, then I wouldn't have been trapped. I think I advanced and did an arrest. I couldn't do the mass arrest because I didn't have enough strength here. I had to get a TAC guy there that could do a mass arrest, and he can arrest 4 guys all by himself. Didn't do that in time. I was able to move, then use like my last turn because I'd spent 2 clash cards, and then did a march and marched into the convention hall. Was immediately able to do the convention hall street theater because then I had an agitator in there, and that was like a big break for the demonstrators. And I think I like it had emptied out some of the units from the convention hall because I was busy chasing the protesters around. I think I was able to even clash there then on the following turn, or maybe I moved up there and clashed and was able to get that 5 exposure. Because I think I had too much strength here because I'd left the National Guard here. So I ended up, got the street theater, like got the convention hall street theater the following turn, moved to the Hilton Hotel because there was no barbed wire there. Then there was like 2 Hilton Hotel, got one of those street theaters that allowed me to put the peace sign down here. I think that was the Women's March. So I was able to do that one. Then I moved him back to the convention hall, and I don't know, I kind of jumped back and forth between there, but I did at least 1 clash there. And you can see I got a banner there too. And I think that may have been some sort of, maybe another street theater card. I forget it. I don't think it was a normal like place a banner there action from the Yippies. I don't remember. It was placed there, I think, through a street theater card. But regardless, like once I had the protesters kind of running amok in the Hilton Hotel and the convention hall, and I'd had enough of them there, and the agitator, eventually the agitator got arrested. You can see he's no longer there. But that really opened things up. And so I mean, depending on what the street theater display has, it could be all Michigan Avenue and Parks and not any convention hall or Hilton Hotel. But it just worked out that by the time I was able to get there, I had run through the display enough and done enough churning of the street theater display to get a couple of convention and Hilton Hotel cards out there that I was able to get once I had the protesters running amok in Hilton Hotel, or the Hilton Hotel and the convention hall. Obviously, it's an incentive for the protesters to go to Michigan Avenue, not only because the exposure is better, but that's also worth $3 a turn around to the establishment. And so Michigan Avenue is a good place to want to try and get the protesters. But you can see early on in the game, I moved the National Guard there, and there was never really any good opportunity for the demonstrators to control Michigan Avenue, and it was also tough for them to maintain much of a presence there without getting mass arrested or tear gassed out of Michigan Avenue. The establishment is going to work like hell to protect Michigan Avenue because it's worth $3 for their budget. So anyway, this is just a bunch of confusing information to anybody who hasn't actually played the game. They're like, what the hell are you talking about? I don't know what all these things are. I didn't even get to the Mob Chaos cards, which are much like the Street Theater cards, another way to add just all kinds of theme to this. So, and these are defined, like different things will happen on these depending on whether it's day or night. I think the day tends to favor the demonstrators, night tends to favor the establishment, but each one has a different quote on it related to the events. And then, a lot of times what that quote is might tie into what the action is on here. I know there's one that was related to the Lincoln Park, because it was like there was a gang in Lincoln Park that said, hey, when the police showed up there, we went out and fought them because they were that was our territory. Yeah, it was here. The police came all the way to Lincoln Park, and in the game, Lincoln Park is out on this peninsula. It's like isolated, so there's not a lot of incentive to go there. I didn't see a lot of street theater cards where you needed an agitator in Lincoln Park, but it's worth good exposure for the demonstrators, and I just didn't even realize that until I was like halfway through the game. I was like, oh, maybe I should have been trying to put guys, because I never put anybody up there. I was like, oh, it's too far out of the way. I'm trying to get to the convention hall. But it's worth it to put guys there and fight. It's worth more than any of these other parks. So don't ignore Lincoln Park if you are the demonstrators. But this particular card was this guy in the Young Lords, which is this gang. And it was like, the only reason the Young Lords came out was because of that, because the police came all the way to Lincoln Park. Like, we wouldn't have done anything if they hadn't been there. And so then you end up, like during the day, you play some mobs in Lincoln Park, but this came at night, and the police was like, oh, hell yeah. I had two injured level 2 platoons the injured box there. And I was like, oh, place two police platoons. Yep, get 2 more 2-strength guys back on the map. That was good for the establishment. So these mob chaos cards will only happen if you, when you do a conflict, which is a clash or like a tear gas or an arrest in a space that involves more than 5 units. And most of the time they did, because it would, like a clash involves all of the MOB units. And usually I had, at least 4. And that means if they're hitting 1 police unit, and if it's a level 2 unit, which is what I'm usually going to go after, that's definitely, that's more than 5 units, or that's 5 units or more right there. So, so usually with a conflict card, you would get you're going to get a mob chaos card. You can also get mob chaos cards if the instability goes off the end of the track. But I was playing a lot of these just because almost every conflict that I had involved more than 5 units on the board. So, but it's another thing that adds a lot of drama, or a lot of period theme to the game, and that also changes your board. It's going to change your board state, especially depending on what time of day it is. So, but all of these elements, and then the moving, the movement capabilities is the MOB can essentially move 2 spaces if they're moving into a space that already has MOB in it. If they're moving into a space that doesn't have any, like from here to here, they can only move and stop. But if there were already units there, then they could keep moving potentially. So, so that's, and then the agitators move, the yippies can move the agitators around. They can drag units with them. The demonstrators can put up barriers to block the police. The police put up barbed wire to block the demonstrators. I think the demonstrators need specific cards to be able to do the barriers. It's not an action that they can normally do, whereas the barbed wire can be totally manipulated. Like Daily deploys the barbed wire, and then the police will have a card that they can use to police it. Now, doing those things, they have to commit, one of their 3 card plays per round to do that. So you have to choose wisely, because if you're deploying barbed wire and placing barbed wire, you're not doing other things that you may want to be doing with that card play. In the same way, if the yippies or the MOB are discarding a conflict card to remove barbed wire, that's, it could be viewed as a wasted card play. Like, you definitely want to make sure you're doing those things for a good reason that's going to contribute to whatever larger plan you have. So, in a classic Euro sense, you can never do all the things that you want to do on a particular turn. So the idea is to try and formulate a plan that's going to gain you some advantage. I worked slowly and deliberately to get into the convention hall through this way, because I knew it was going to be very difficult to do it through Michigan Avenue with the National Guard there. And, sure enough, I never made it from Michigan Avenue to Hilton Hotel. I had to come in through the back door, essentially. So, and you can try and prevent adding to the establishment budget by leaving your guys arrested. But if there's too many guys that are arrested, you want to have, the demonstrators tend to want to have people everywhere so that they're at least denying income. Because I think it's the establishment gets income from any place that doesn't have any, without any demonstrator unit present. So, they're going to want to make sure that Michigan Avenue is always empty at least, and then as many other zones as they can, whereas the demonstrators just want to have as many people all over the map as they can, to try and stymie the establishment's plans. But also, they want to have their agitators spread around so that they can do the street theater cards as much as possible. So I loved the strategy of trying to figure out, crack the sort of movement puzzle, and the establishment saying, oh, now you got barbed wire in front of you. All of your time spent moving over here was wasted. Now you're gonna have to burn a card, to get through this barbed wire. Or, I could tell with the demonstrators, okay, if I move my guys here, they've got tack here and here, if they tear gas that, and drop barbed wire right before the tear gas. So, you could figure out the pattern that it was going to be. It was going to be, all right, Daly's deployed barbed wire into the supply. So, the police are going to either deploy barbed wire first, or they're going to move their tack first. and then that third card is going to be tear gas. So you've got to like make sure that your demonstrators are dispersed enough, or you don't want to get them trapped, and you can see the trap being set and then know when it's going to be sprung because of how the cards are. You know what the cards are. You don't know when they're going to play them, but you know it's almost likely that the tear gas is going to be third, because they're going to have to spend the first two cards getting their tack guys. These guys are typically the only ones that can do tear gas, not the regular cubes. Trying to get their tack guys in the right spot, and then drop the barbed wire, then spring the tear gas. So you could see that coming and now have to plan against it as the demonstrators. And that's going to, interfere with your own plans, because you might have to be scrambling to move guys around so you don't lose, a bunch of level 2 strength mobs and stuff like that. So it's just a great, it's very elegantly balanced in my view. Again, it's only one playthrough. I don't know if there's broken cards in here, or broken combos, or broken street theater deck machinations or what. But what I played through, it was very elegant. Your time's very limited. You've only got 5 rounds. That's 3 card plays per round per each faction. So, the time is very finite. But you still get the sense that a lot of things happened and the board state changed. You get a lot of back and forth. The exposure, it did go off the end for the establishment at least once. It just wasn't as frequent as it was for the demonstrators. I think that can be managed. But in general, I really enjoyed the elegance of it. The rules were solid. There's videos to watch to learn how to play too. But the rules, I didn't have a major issue with. I did have to check them a lot, because there's a lot of things that'll happen where you don't remember specifically, like, oh wait, if I take a guy off the board, wait, does it go into the general supply? Or, I think I had to look that up for the cubes. Like, if a cube comes off the delegate track, does it go back in the bag, or does it go back to the supply? So just, questions like that. So there's going to be a lot of that kind of rules reference, but otherwise it was pretty easy to pick up on. The sequence of play is really good. There's a great quick reference that runs you through all of the different phases of each round. So I don't know, it was enjoyable. Really liked just the historic theme of it was great, and the production value is great. All the lots of historic photos, the historic pictures, just and the quotes and everything. It was just great, deeply steeped in the history of this particular event, which I really, really appreciated. The artwork and everything too. Again, the period art. Although I noticed something, because I took a picture of the earlier state of the board here that I was posting to my Board Game Geek Guild's Discord channel, and noticed that the International Amphitheater, this was misspelled. It should be amphitheater. It's like a PH, which I thought was interesting. So there was a misspelling on the board, but not going to be noticeable for most people. It's the convention hall. The International Amphitheater was actually just the technical name of the building that the convention was in. But just something I noticed when I was looking at the picture. Like, I didn't notice the entire time I was playing the game. I just happened to notice it when I was looking at the picture on the Discord channel. But anyway, that's pretty much the only flaw that I've seen so far of the game. So, I guess there's another flaw, not a huge flaw, but these little standy things don't stay very well in all of the you can see the flags, they fell out. So I'll need to, put a little spot of glue or something, and I think glue those permanently. Otherwise, yeah, the only real complaint that I have about the game. Otherwise, cards are nice, board's nice, pieces are nice. The rule book's a nice sort of not super glossy. I guess the inside pages, the outside pages are like a matte finish, and then the inside pages are glossy. But good components otherwise. And then again, just really, really enjoyed this playthrough and the balancing act, the elegant balance that the game has created between all the different factions. Really was just a joy. to play through. So if you do have a chance to get this, and especially if the subject at all interests you, it's a very educational game in terms of, you know, stuff provided in the rules, about the history of all the stuff surrounding the Democratic Convention in '68, all the quotes on the cards, all the pictures, just a great educational, immersive experience around this event that's very well gamified in terms of what the stakes were for each side, and then how those stakes are represented in the game. So I just really enjoyed it. Highly recommend it. If you do have a chance to get a copy, I recommend you do so.